It is my greatest pleasure and privilege to say hello and to welcome Brenna Huckabee, who is an amazing young woman with some really interesting story to tell us. Some of you may know of her because she's a Paralympic athlete, gold medalist, and we'll talk a bit about that later. But she's represented her country, and she has survived cancer and survived the late effects of that as well, with strength and courage. So it's a real pleasure to have you here, Brenna, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to just pile on in with kind of questions, and we'll take this through. We've got to be through by 3, so I want to make sure we cover everything. So I'd just like to start by asking you to tell us a little something about your early life. You know, what's your hometown, parents, got any brothers and sisters, that type of thing, just to paint a picture of you in your early years.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is funny because there's no mountains or snow there. So I did not grow up snowboarding. I actually grew up as a gymnast. My parents put me in gymnastics when I was about 8 years old because I was doing backflips in my school field, and my older brothers, I have 2 older brothers, would tell my parents, like, Mom, she's learning to do backflips at school. Like, she's gonna hurt herself. Like, can you put her into gymnastics or something? My mom likes to say it was because she was saving her TV, because I would do cartwheels in the house all the time, and that was when the TVs were on the floor and like close to the ground. So she was like, I was saving my TV from having a foot going through it. So I grew up in Louisiana, 2 brothers, lots of gymnastics, lots of fun, always outside, always running around. Yeah, it was just a TV childhood in Louisiana.
So you were one of those bouncy, bendy kids that we see on the TV, who's doing some fancy stuff on the gym mat. So that's great to hear. So you know, how and when did you work out, or did you and your mum and dad figure that something wasn't right for you? I mean, how old were you, and when did you start figuring something's not right here and we need to get me checked out?
Yeah, so I developed a knee pain when I was 13. And the weird thing about the knee pain is it only hurts sometimes. But regardless, my mom wanted to make sure that everything was okay. So she took me to the doctor. And in this doctor's appointment, we did an x-ray, but there was nothing on the x-ray. So they ordered me just to go to physical therapy and then strengthen those muscles and then come back if nothing changes. Well, I didn't grow up with a lot of money, and so physical therapy was a privilege that we did not have. So we decided, like, okay, I'm in gymnastics, just take a little bit of extra time to make sure those muscles are strong. And that's what I did. And that knee pain continued for that entire year. But again, it would only hurt sometimes. So my coaches at the time chalked up that knee pain to being like mentally not in the gymnastic zone. Like, I was 13, I was starting to get to that age where those mental blocks become really real and actually start holding you back from sport. And so everyone had just chalked that up, that like I was mentally not ready to be at the level I was in gymnastics. Until I went on a 3-mile run with my brother. And when I came home, I was in tears, which I never cry from pain. That's just not something I do. And so I was in tears, and my leg was swollen. And my mom was like, okay, that's it. Like, you're going to the doctor. We're going to figure this out. Something is very wrong. And that was on a Friday. And I think it's important to share, I tried to talk my mom out of sending me to the doctor, because an hour later, I was fine. I was back outside, jumping on the trampoline, going off with my life. But my mom, she's like, I've seen this story too many times. I've seen you in pain. And then the next thing you know, you're fine. We're getting checked out. And once we did, we found a tumor on the x-ray, confirmed it with an MRI. And less than a week later, I was at MD Anderson, Texas cancer facility,
Wow.
getting a biopsy.
Just out of interest, did you ever have more pain at night? Do you remember that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Not that I remember.
It's just quite interesting. I know that, osteosarcoma, I've heard of bone cancer, but that being one of the early signs is night pains. That doesn't happen with everybody, but it's just interesting to know that. So, okay, so you got your MRI scan and it was confirmed. And I mean, just tell us what it's like, or what it was like for you and your mum getting that diagnosis, and how did that feel when you heard that? Did you really know what
Yeah.
to expect?
No, so this is like slightly embarrassing for me. But when I was told I had cancer, I did not know what cancer was. The only thing that I knew about cancer was that you threw up and you lost your hair. And so, and people died. So when I was told I had cancer, I was confused. I didn't understand how cancer could be in my leg. Um, and so I just had a lot of questions rather than fear because I just didn't understand what was happening.
What was your age again? I forget.
That's why it's embarrassing. I was 14.
14. Yeah, yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's a tough age to take all that stuff in. Yeah. So really, you had a lot of questions, but not really an appreciation of what was ahead of you, other than the kind of what you see on TV. You lose your hair and that kind of stuff. But not really a clarity. And what about how did your family react? Because obviously they would know more. And I guess that was a trauma for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so my parents obviously were, my mom went into like fight mode. She's like, okay, we're going to find the best doctor. We're going to make sure that we are checking all our boxes, you're taken care of, our insurance is working. Like my mom was in fight mode. My dad, he was in like support mode. Like, I'm just going to make sure everybody is okay mentally. I laughed because my brothers were like, Brenna, you're going to die. And I was like, what do you mean I'm gonna die? And then I just like had this whole panic. And I'm like, it's funny because that's just the dynamic my brothers and I have.
Yeah.
And also that's like they're coping, like they were trying to process. And so we're all, me and my brothers are all just like, oh no, what do we do?
Wow. Wow. Yeah. And did you tell your friends, and how did they react?
Yeah, so it's crazy because I found out that I had a tumor. I went to school the next day and then I never returned.
Hmm.
So I told a few people that we had found a tumor, but at this point, my tumor was like perfectly round. So they really thought it was benign. So I told like a few people, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go to the doctor in Texas. They found something, but it's benign. So I'll be back in like a couple months or whatever. Um, and so everybody's like, oh, like thinking about you or whatever. Until I got the official diagnosis and started chemotherapy, did it really circle around school that I was not coming back. It was not benign. And
Hmm.
yeah, it was scary.
So tell us a bit about what treatment you had to go through, and the point at which you got to surgery as well. So what was your pathway through the cancer treatment?
I started with chemotherapy, and I chose to save my leg. I wanted to do limb salvage which is the surgery where they put an internal prosthetic, which has the cosmetic look of it's your real leg, but it doesn't have the function of your real leg anymore. But I had chosen that as my surgery option. And unfortunately, my body didn't respond to the chemotherapy. When my tumor was supposed to shrink, it actually ended up growing in size. And at this point, amputation was my only life-saving option. So I had an amputation only 2 rounds into the chemotherapy since the chemo didn't take. And then I followed up with more chemotherapy after.
Wow. So just sort of on reflection, now having had an amputation and a prosthetic now, do you think actually that that's a better thing to have happened than for you to have had the internal work done that you were hoping to have at the time?
Yeah, it it was the right call for me. I think it was the universe, God, spirit, source, whatever you want to call it, like guiding me into the path that I needed to go on, which was amputation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's amazing. I mean, that's so, you know, that's a huge deal. I mean, you're 14 and you're getting told that you're gonna lose a part of your leg. You know, what does that feel like at that age? And, you know, what was going through your head at that time?
Survival. You know, at that time it was either lose your leg, lose your life, and it was a no-brainer. It was survival.
Hmm. That's amazing. And then you had chemotherapy following through afterwards. That was for weeks and months, I guess. You were carrying on with that. And do they? What's the process? I mean, do they get right into working you with prosthetics right away? You know, how soon were you starting to have to do physio and stuff during this treatment phase?
So after my amputation, I mean, literally like the next day you're starting therapy, physical therapy or occupational therapy, I think at the time. And then once your body, I don't know, I think my stitches were still in, I started actual physical therapy. And I did physical therapy after my amputation for a very long time because I struggled getting used to my prosthetic. But going back, I didn't get a prosthetic until January. I lost my leg in November. I got my first leg in January, and they didn't want to give it to me yet. They wanted me to wait a little bit longer, but I was like, I can't wait any longer. I want to be moving. I want to be mobile. So they gave me my first prosthetic in January.
Yeah, right. And you said an interesting thing to me when we first met and we were just talking about you, and you said the trauma of losing your hair was almost as bad as the trauma of losing your leg. And that, I'd just like you to just kind of tell me what that was like for you as a 14-year-old girl and why that was an issue.
Yeah, I mean, when I think back to like losing my hair, and I think it's because it was the only thing that made me feel like normal and the same, because that's the first thing people see when they look at you. Like I remember we did when I was in high school, obviously I was 14, so I was in high school. My high school did like a big fundraiser for me, and I had a crush on this boy, and he was at the fundraiser, and I was wearing a wig because I had just lost all my hair. And somebody had, actually not somebody, like one of my really good friends, this is a little pain point. However, to her, this was the dynamic of our friendship. To me, I was talking to a cute boy who I was trying to impress. And I had my wig on and she pulls it off and she goes, look how bald she is, or Brenna is. And I was horrified.
Yeah.
And I still don't think I've mentally recovered, but my leg could fall off even to this day. And I'm like, oh, my prosthetic came off. Like it just is. But for whatever reason, my hair, it was just such a big piece of my identity. So it was just so much harder for me than my leg, which is crazy.
Yeah, well, it's not crazy. That's the thing, you know. I mean,
Right. It's not.
actually, this why I wanted you to talk about it is because we know from so many young people that we've spoken to that, you know, body image and how you look is really important in those teenage years. And you know, it's the time when you care about if you've got a spot on your forehead, you know, and
Right.
you know, and so it is really important, and it is a, you know, a big psychological barrier. So thanks for sharing that. So okay, so you get through surgery and treatment, and they say, okay, Brenna, go get on with the rest of your life. So what kind of things are going through your head then, you know, when they're saying, well, you know, go for it, get on with it, you know? I mean, did you feel ready then?
Oh no. I remember ringing the bell signifying like chemotherapy is over, you did it, you beat cancer. And I simultaneously felt so like relieved and happy, but also like dreaded it. I dreaded the next part because I had held on through my cancer journey, thinking about the life that I had before cancer. I'm like, okay, I can get through this because I'll have gymnastics, my friends, my passions, my plans, whatever. I have all of these things there. But when I rang that bell, the reality that those things don't exist anymore. And I have to rebuild literally everything, starting from relearning how to walk. And it really hit me at that moment how much I had lost from cancer and how ill prepared I felt to go into the world like nothing had happened.
Yeah. And do you think that affected you? Did you think that affected you mentally? Was you know, in terms of your mental health? I mean, do you think that you went into some dark places then? Was that challenging?
Yeah, I mean, how could it not? I think if it doesn't affect anyone, like give me whatever you got, because that's amazing. I was in one of the darkest moments of my life at that point. I felt hopeless. I felt like I was just in a hole and there was no ladder or anything to get me out. And I what ended up getting me out was sport. My brothers and my parents, I remember I was laying on the couch and they came in and they were like, we're having an intervention. And I was like, oh no, what is this? And they're like, Brenna, every time that you're lying on that couch and you're not living, cancer is winning. Cancer is still beating you. And we don't want that to happen anymore. And they were like, sport gave you the life that you had before. Why can't sport give that to you now? Like, let's figure it out. Let's get active. Let's get moving. And so that was probably the first time that I actually felt hopeful for my future and empowered. I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I felt a little more empowered that like I could go back to something, even though it was different. I knew there was something out there for me.
And did you, I mean, did you find kind of most of that from yourself, or did you get help from your family to get you to that place? Or did you have, you know, people that motivated you, that you looked around, you know, I mean, Paralympians and other people that are doing sports, you know, who have a disability or an amputation that they've had to cope with, you know, there are other role models out there. Did you start to look at other people?
Yeah, so unfortunately, social media wasn't as big as it is now. So I couldn't just get on the internet and find somebody doing amazing things as an amputee. It was a lot harder to find and search for those things. Through my hospital, I met other young adults and teenagers who were doing really incredible things as amputees. And I ended up connecting with them. And then through a ton of Googling, somehow my mom found Lacey Henderson. She's also a cancer survivor, and she was a Colorado cheerleader. And my mom had found her, and she was like, Brenna, she's tumbling, she's doing gymnastic stuff. Like, look, like you can do stuff. And so that is how I really felt motivated, seeing other people doing maybe not the exact same things that I was doing, but similar things that I wanted to do.
Got it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the pathway to snowboarding. How does a girl from Baton Rouge, who's probably hardly ever seen snow in her life, get to start an interest in a sport like that? I mean, how do you get drawn to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my hospital at the time would take kids that had lost mobility from cancer onto a ski rehabilitation ski trip. So it was the idea that if these people that lost mobility through cancer could go skiing, then think of all the like empowerment they have to go home and do the things, the day-to-day activities, right? Like if I could ski, well, then I can get up and make a sandwich. So that was the whole idea behind this trip. And I wanted to snowboard for two reasons. One, I thought it looked cooler. And two, it reminded me of a balance beam. So I begged and pleaded, because they don't like above the knee amputees to snowboard for the first time in these programs, because snowboarding is more dangerous to start. People break wrists and stuff. It's not dangerous, but a little more risk involved. But I begged and begged and begged for like weeks before this trip to let me snowboard. And they did. And I remember going down the mountain. I sucked, but I remember like looking up and seeing like the trees in the steep mountain and being like, I'm going to do that. Like, I want to do that. I'm going to do that. I can do that. And I just, for the first time since cancer, I felt a draw to challenge, to push myself, to do something, which was really incredible. So I think that whole if you can ski, you can make a sandwich thing. There's something to that.
That's great. And you know, are there differences in how you manage a snowboard compared to somebody who you know, who's got both their legs, and you know, what do you have to sort of compensate in different ways as technique?
Oh yeah, I mean, with everything in life that's dominant with legs, yes. I use a prosthetic that helps me snowboard, but I don't have a lot of use of my back leg. So my back leg is my prosthetic side. It mostly follows, or like it follows my front leg. So I don't have like an independent use of it as I would if I had two legs. But I can still do a lot.
Yeah, yeah, we've seen that, and we're going to see that in a minute as well. So tell me, you know, how did then this evolve into something competitive for you? And how did you get, I mean, you obviously got really good at it. So, you know, how did that evolve, and how did you start to, you know, put a lot of hours in? I guess you got to put a lot of hours in to get as good as you did. So what happened there?
Yeah. So I at the time that I started snowboarding, it was not a Paralympic sport yet. But I had heard that they were trying to make it a Paralympic sport in Korea. They had tried for Sochi, but they were denied at this point in the story. And so I was like, okay, well, I've got some time to get into snowboarding, because at this point I had 6 years till Korea. So I've got some time to learn how to snowboard and figure out if this were for me. And so I had made the commitment with my mom to move to Utah to just learn how to snowboard. But I knew that it was going to be a Paralympic sport one day. So I had it in the back of my mind. But by the time we actually moved to Utah, it did become a Paralympic sport in Sochi. So I was like, dang it, if I would have just acted a little bit sooner, maybe I could have made it. But regardless, I didn't. But I watched Sochi. I watched all the women compete, and I was like, I can do that. Like, I can do that. I know for a fact I can do that, and I can be really good at it. So I had linked up with a team in Utah, got a coach, and just followed their lead. Was like, what do I need to do? I need to go to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym. I need to focus on my diet. Focus on my diet. I need a new leg. I need a new leg. And I just dove in and committed.
Good for you. And did your family move to Utah because of you and snowboarding, or was that just a coincidence? Because obviously Utah is the center of you know, a lot of American winter sports, isn't it? So
yeah, so it was just me and my mom. My mom and dad are still married, and they were still married at that time. And my brothers, one was in college, and then the other one was just figuring their life out. So they had already moved out. And yeah, it was just me and my mom. My mom had just finished her nursing degree. She was a teacher before, and she'd always wanted to live in the mountains. So for her, it was like, okay, I can go get nursing experience, live in the mountains, and help my daughter at the same time.
perfect.
No brainer for her. And so I followed.
Great.
But it was not easy. Like, I had to get multiple jobs. I was in high school. I had to just, well, I didn't have to snowboard. I got to snowboard. It was worth it. But like, it wasn't just like move to Utah and just snowboard all the time. Like, I had to, at this point, contribute now to the household, which I didn't have to when we lived in Louisiana, because it was just one household. But it was good. I mean, it was amazing. And I'm so grateful for my mom for that. She's an inspiration to me for sure.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good to hear. So just tell us about, you know, the excitement of being part of something like the Paralympics and representing your country at that level. I mean, what's that feel like?
It's a lot of pressure, especially because around the games, like, all of your opportunities rely on how well you do. And that's one snippet of your entire career. You can win everything all season, but nobody really cares unless you win the games. And that is a lot of pressure. But for me, I continued to connect to like why I started snowboarding in the first place. And my motivation behind snowboarding and competing was, I wanted to show people, regardless of what you went through, your life can still be beautiful and great, even though it looks different. Because that to me was my motivation to doing something more with my life. And I wanted to show that to other people and kids with cancer, because my life is so completely different than it was before.
Of course.
But it's awesome.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. Well, listen, I hope Laura's ready and we can do the technology on this, but I know I've seen it before and I can't tire of watching it. I love watching this. I'm going to show everybody your gold medal winning race from the last Olympics. So are you able to get that up on the screen for us, Laura?
Yes, hold on.
That's the wrong one.
I know, I'm switching tabs.
There you go.
Can everybody hear?
So here we go to the top of the course with Brenna Huckabee before yet another Chinese rider to top off the women's SBLL2 category. Pressure's on. Medals will be awarded here. So we have Huckabee now, who sits number 4 with her first run time, Tina, of 1:18.13.
And that is not far off of what the lead time is. She is riding these berms exactly where you need to be. Her positioning is really on point. See how she goes high? And then switches to the toe side edge.
What do you think the nerves are right now? She knows where the standings are. She's heard the crowd down below. So she knows the pressure's on. If anybody can get it done, it's Brenna Huckabee.
Yeah, extremely, she's experienced, a fierce competitor, a strong rider.
Oh, wavering there. So Huckabee sitting in 4th right now needs to find some speed. And she's hanging on tight, Tina. Incredible balance by Huckabee. But will that affect her time as she comes through the bottom rollers? Huckabee grinding for more speed, and she does it. She pulls into the top spot. So Huckabee in gold medal position with 1 athlete left.
Absolutely fantastic racing. Oof. she surprised herself. There were a couple moments where she hit, the snow snakes. But she held up throughout that entire race. She came around those gates, perfect position around the berm, stayed high where she needed to, maintained her composure.
I'll do it again. Hi, Lila. Hi, Sloan, Tristan, Mom, Dad, Jordan, Jeremy, Brittany. That was for you guys. I miss you. I love you. Represent Louisiana.
There you go.
Brenna, awesome. You are on the podium.
That's good. Thank you, Laura. Then I cut right there. All right. Well, big round of applause for everybody, please. That's amazing. I love watching that. And so, I mean, how does that feel coming out of that? And then the next rider obviously didn't make it. And so, you had that gold medal. What was that like?
Clearly I couldn't believe it. I was like, yeah, still can't believe it. It was wild. I even talked to my coach now. I'm like, I was all over the place, like at the bottom section. And he's like, yeah, what do I tell you? When you race, you ride the line of out of control. I was like, yeah, I was riding that out of control line for sure.
Well, it's amazing. I can't imagine doing that on 2 legs, let alone having that with a prosthetic as well. So, I mean, congratulations, and it was a great Olympics for the whole American team. So I was glued to it. Actually, I watched most of it, and it was really good to see that. So I feel very lucky to be interviewing you now. I don't suppose you haven't got it there to show us, have you?
No, I don't. Dang it. Oh, sorry.
Never mind. Okay, I'm sure it's there. Well, anyway, thank you for that, and thanks for your service to the country. So So you've got some other priorities in life now. Tell us about where that's taken you, because you've got other things to think about now, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got two girls. I said their name in the video, Lila and Sloan, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. So that's my number one focus.
So did you know, or did you think that there might be some problems for you in being able to have children? Because of course there's you know, a lot of people do come out of treatment infertile. Did you know what your fertility status was?
Yeah, so I was 16 or 17, I can't remember exactly, the first time that I had gotten my whole system checked out. And I went through premenopause after my treatments. And so that kind of sparked a lot of what is happening with my body. And in these appointments, I found out that I had like a less than 15% chance of having kids. And I went and got a second opinion because I'm like, well, no offense, but I don't think you're the best. I'm going to go get a second opinion. So I went back to MD Anderson and saw doctors there, and they told me the exact same thing. And they said, you know, here are some pamphlets when you're ready for adoption and other options. And so at 16, 17, I was already thinking about the fact that I could not have children.
Yeah. Did that, I mean, that must have brought you down as well?
Yeah, I still remember looking back, like just journaling constantly about what that meant to me, because growing up, like I grew up in Louisiana, like I had mentioned, and you grow up, you go to high school, you go to college, you get a job, you get married, you have a family. And so that was so ingrained in me. And I'm like, well, who am I if I can't fulfill this journey that I'm supposed to be on, this path I'm supposed to be on? And it made for a lot of conversations about like, what do I actually care about? Do I even care about this path? Do I even care about this plan? And it also made for a lot of uncomfortable conversations with any boyfriends that I had, because it would start getting serious and I would be like, well, this is the reality. This is where I am. If this ever goes any further one day, like I can't have children. I don't know if you want to stick around or, you know, move on. So it's weird, but
and at that time, you know, with your husband, he was prepared to take that leap because you were telling him the same thing, I guess, at that time.
Yeah, so he actually came to one of the doctor's appointments with me to hear about like everything that was going on. And yeah, I remember talking to him, and we were like 18 at this point, and I was just like, do we want to keep going? And he's like, we can adopt if we ever get there, like I'm so down for adoption, it's fine, like not even worried about it. And so I was okay with that too. And I was at this point as well, I was on estrogen and birth control as well, because that was the only thing keeping my system like regular.
Okay. So just taking you back to the point of diagnosis, did anybody talk to you then about infertility, and were you given options to freeze your eggs at that time or anything? Was there any conversations that took place then?
Yeah, so my mom at the beginning of my cancer journey, when she was in fight mode, that was one of her concerns. Unfortunately, with osteosarcoma, when you find it, you have to act fast because it can change. As we've seen, I nearly doubled my tumor in size in 2 weeks. So you have to act fast. So I didn't have time to freeze my eggs. But it wasn't that big of a concern to my doctors because the drugs that I started on, infertility wasn't really like a risk. But once my body didn't respond to the chemotherapy and I had my amputation, I had to go on drugs that were not, or chemo drugs that were not necessarily like a part of the protocol yet. And these drugs, infertility was a side effect. And that is what like messed up my system. And so I knew when I was doing chemo that I was messing up my chances for having kids in the future. But I just didn't believe that it was going to affect me until I started going to those doctors and they were like, it affected you, honey. I was like, oh no.
So you got 2 miracle kids. Was that a surprise to you? I mean, that just happened. You were just in the 15%.
And what they had said, so that was 15% at the age of like 17. And they said every year thereafter, it's going to decrease because you continue to shed your eggs. And I was like, so by the time I was 19, I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, it's been 2 years. Like, what is my percentage now? And I was on birth control. But yeah, I found out I was pregnant because I peed my pants in Walmart and I went to the doctor and I was like, I'm anxious. I'm so anxious. I peed my freaking pants in the coffee filter aisle. And I'm like, I need help. Can you give me some medicine or something? And what's wild is she asked me if I was active and I was like, yeah, but my doctors have told me that I have like a very slim chance of ever having kids. And so she took my word for it and was not going to check my urine. And right before I was leaving, my mom's a nurse and I called my mom before this doctor's appointment. She's like, you should get checked for a UTI though. Cause like peeing your pants, I hear you about anxiety and all the things you have going on, but she's like, you don't usually pee your pants from anxiety. And so as I was getting ready to leave, cause I can be a little socially awkward. I've taken a lot of growth. I like got the courage and I was like, can you just check me for a UTI just in case? And she's like, oh, okay, sure. Here, go pee in this cup. And when she came back, she's like, oh, you have glucose in your urine. And, I started Googling, like, what does that mean? And she went back, had me get checked for diabetes. And I saw that it could be pregnancy or diabetes. And I was like, we went back into the room. She's like, you don't have diabetes. Come back if anything changes. And I said, well, I'm no mathematician, but Google says it could be pregnancy. And she's like, oh, I guess I should go check for that. I almost left and she didn't even check for pregnancy. Come to find out I was 5 months pregnant.
Wow.
5 months.
Wow. Isn't that amazing? That's incredible. So I guess you were pretty happy about that.
Sweet. Would love to have not been 19. And in the middle of my snowboarding career, am very poor. I would have loved to not be all that, but it obviously ended up working out. Yeah,
of course. Yeah. Well, I mean, it is incredible, and the odds are against you, and that's significant. The reason I asked about the fertility questions early on is it's something that we're aware of. It is not always dealt with well by doctors, and I'm sure MD Anderson's the type of place that would be completely on top of that. But we do know of young people who weren't told about the option, to freeze their eggs when they could have done. And weren't given proper counseling at that time. So, it's something that we're very aware of, and we're trying to, make sure that any of the hospitals we're working with, that they have really good policies and practice on that. But okay, so let's talk about what are the what's the challenges of chasing after a 2-year-old with a prosthetic then?
A lot. They run and I can't. But that's okay because I'm a leash mom. I have no shame in it. If we were out in public and I know it's just me and my 2-year-old, leash, because she doesn't like to have her handheld.
Right.
Leash.
Right.
So you adapt, right? Like things are hard for some people and easier for others, but there's so many like resources available. You adapt, you figure it out, and well, you can't run when you're on a leash.
And what do you what do they think of your prosthetic? Because kids are pretty honest, aren't they?
Oh yeah. Honestly, like they don't notice. Well, they didn't notice it. So my 6-year-old obviously now knows, like, okay, mommy is different. Mommy has a prosthetic. And so she's in this like phase where she wants to tell everyone about it. So we're at the park and I'm watching, and she'll just come up with like a group of kids and be like, look at my mommy's leg. And I'm just like, oh. What do I do?
You're cool now. You're
apparently, and so so that's like all we do.
You're a transformer.
Apparently, yeah. And so I'm kind of at the point though. I'm like, Lila, I love you, and I love how you want to show off my leg. Can I just have like a moment of peace? Can I just not? But she doesn't. She thinks it's cool. It's different, and it's nothing bad, which I think is amazing. Like, she gets to grow up seeing prosthetics and disabilities as normal and just as is. And one of my favorite things, just to like see a little bit into her world with a disabled mom, is she always tells people, she's like, I want to be a Paralympian. And I'm like, no, pause, hun. You want to be an Olympian, the other Paralympics. Like, you don't want to be you don't want to be a Paralympian. You want to be an Olympian. I don't want you losing your legs or mobility. But you can still be an elite athlete like mommy.
Well, I'm absolutely certain that one of the reasons why they're so well adjusted to that is the way that you've brought them up, because I'm sure you've not, you've been very straight with them and shared, and I'm sure you're a great mum. So congratulations to that. So look, we might have a lot of young people who might see this film. There might be people just starting out on treatment, or people that have a bone sarcoma like yourself, or other types of cancer. And what would, what's your kind of parting message to them, really? What do you, is there anything that you would like to say, or like them to think or feel as they're going through this?
Yeah, I've got many things that I want to say. I will try and keep it short. One of my favorite things that was told to me during my journey, and now that I'm finally in the place that this person told me I was going to get to one day, I just really value that advice. And my doctor had said, one day, Brenna, you're going to look back on this and it's just going to be a bad memory. And I remember at the time thinking, yeah, whatever, easy for you to say, you're not in it. But now that's exactly where I am. So one day you will wake up and this will just be a bad memory. It won't be a part of your everyday. It won't be a struggle and a grind anymore. It just will be a bad memory. And so that's something I like to, even to this day, remind myself of when things are very hard. My other thing I mentioned earlier, just because your life looks different doesn't mean it can't still be great. Cancer is going to change a lot in your life. But it's also going to make for some really amazing opportunities and friends. And it's special. You're a part of a community that you didn't ask to be a part of, but it's a pretty amazing one, pretty strong one. I love my cancer community. And I had a third one, and I'm sure it'll come to me later, but I can't think of it in this moment anymore.
Well,
but you got it.
Maybe it'll come up in a bit, because what I want to do now is, if Laura, you can unmute everybody, is ask if anybody has any questions. You can either put your hand up, or there is the chat feature. If you don't want to speak up, you can just ask a question in the chat, and I'll pick that up and ask Brenna for you. But does anybody out there want to say anything or share any of their experiences? I know we've got at least a couple of young survivors in our midst who have been through some of this journey. So anybody want anything to want to ask or comment on?
I think everyone can unmute themselves.
You cannot, yeah, so you can all unmute yourselves now.
Okay, guys, I don't bite.
Hi.
This is Kate.
Yes. Hi.
I was hoping you'd speak, Kate. Kate's got her own story. Go on.
Well, I actually know Brenna. I don't know if you remember me, but we met on the Sunshine Kids trip reunion many years ago.
Oh,
hi.
yes, I remember you.
Yes, I remember sitting next to Brenna on a bus. And I mean, yeah, it was really refreshing to like hear your story again, and actually just like hear so many parallels. And I don't want to cry, but I just feel like so like special to see. Like I like vividly remember you, and it was like fresh for you.
Yeah.
And I felt like you had like you were asking me questions and I was giving you advice. But I remember thinking to myself, I think I'm gonna learn more from her than she like will from me.
Oh,
And it's interesting to think that at like such a young age, because you were like worried about, you know, like the like boy situation or just like all that, but you have an energy about you that has just totally like, you've never like lost your essence, you know, and like all of the things that you have accomplished like don't surprise me. I'm just like so happy to like see your life and just like follow you, and like you're an inspiration to everyone, but like, you know, even myself. And I don't want to lose like contact again. I like popped, it's so weird because Hillary had like asked me to come on, and I had like a meeting, and I was like, oh my God, I have to jump on. I have to see Brenna so we can like reconnect again. So I was just so happy to like be part of this call to like chat further. Sorry to like really.
no, that's great. You know, and I just want to say, you know, Kate is somebody that's been a supporter of Teen Cancer America for many years. She had a osteosarcoma and also has a prosthetic leg and has had to deal with that. But Kate has been the most amazing ambassador for us. And she, Hillary, who's on here today, is testament to that, because she was working in the hospital where Kate was treated, and she's been on her own journey, as you can imagine, but she's been a fantastic inspiration to us and a real ambassador in just the same way, you know, that you have in your own way. Kate has been something special. You've been something special for us, Kate, and we admire you and everything that you have given us as well, and how much you've helped us and other young people. You know, she's always there for us, and she keeps coming back. We never let her go. That's one thing, Brenna. If you get involved with us, we never let you go. Kate will tell you. It doesn't matter. She's been to New York. She's been living in North Carolina. Wherever she's been, we follow her, and she comes back and does stuff for us. So it's great to have you both there. But we will for sure make that connection between the two of you so you can reconnect.
Yes.
I would love that. I remember, so like I had just, it was fresh. I think I was like 15. It was fresh. I like was just growing my hair back. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, like look how she's dressing, look how confident she is. Like, I want to be like that. So you had a massive impact on me, Kate. Like you have no idea. We're not losing connection after this. See, the cancer community is amazing.
That's nice. That's great. Anyone else want to chip in or say anything? Just
yeah, I have a question. I have two. This is Gina.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So first question is, when you talk about being a para-Olympian for the Olympics, were you like the clip that we saw, was that competing against other like regular Olympians, or was that competing against para-Olympians? Like, I don't know how it all works. Are you even allowed to like?
That's a great question. So Paralympics, it stands for parallel to the Olympics, and it's always 2 weeks after the Olympics. So it's a separate event, and it's all for people with disabilities, but elite athletes. So it's like people who have been training for years and years and years that have made it to the point of the Paralympics. So I was competing against other women with disabilities. But what's interesting is typically you compete against people of similar severity of disability. But I was actually competing against women with lesser disability than myself. So it was actually like a more challenging Paralympics for me because of that. But there were no able-bodied athletes.
Wow.
In some of those sports, there are some crazy kind of grading systems that are so complicated. I can't understand it, but where they actually grade the level of disability so that some people, so everybody's even in the end, but you have different abilities. But you want to get watching it, Gina, because I enjoy it so much more than the real Olympics. It's really good. It's really good to watch, and you can see some people with just amazing, you know, just extraordinary what they've overcome to get there. So it's a good It's good watching. Anyway, Jeannie, you had another question.
Yeah, just want to say I'm just amazed at your tenacity. You don't let anything stop you, it sounds like. One of my questions, because I work with young adults, and I take on the oncofertility section of their options and things. So my question is, once you were in survivorship and you had the talk of like what your fertility looked like currently, did you ever have options, or maybe it wasn't an option for you, I don't know, to go ahead and preserve then versus like just let it, let's just see how it plays out?
Yeah. So whenever I went in when I was 17, or whenever I went in for the first time to get everything checked out, I was actually told that I didn't have enough viable eggs to even try to preserve anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's crazy that I have kids. It's wild.
Yeah. Well, it gives my patients hope then. Like
Absolutely.
I can use that story, not to give them false hope, but like if it happened with one,
But Gina, that's a good point. That's a good point, though, that actually survivors should be offered that if there's potential for that, shouldn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that is part of, that's something that we ought to, make sure that because of course, there's something very final about being told that you're probably never going to be able to have children. And I've met several people who've had children subsequently to being told that. And I believe and with men, I've even found that they've become more fertile years after treatment. So there has been, a regeneration. And
wow.
I don't think people are told necessarily to just keep testing and keep trying. Because there may be opportunities for that. So I think we're learning a lot, but it's very interesting anyway.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Anybody else want to? We've got another 5 minutes.
I just want to add to that. I was told time and time again, like, oh, my cousin had cancer and chemotherapy and she had kids. And I was super frustrated by that because I'm like, well, she didn't have my chemotherapy. She didn't have my treatment. But clearly, like, it still can happen. So I think like when people are giving the advice and the hope of just making sure it aligns to like their treatment plans a little bit, because that was like a big frustration of mine. But I do agree, like having the option after to preserve is like very important to even just mention to patients, because I feel like you finish cancer or you finish chemo and then you move on. And so it would be nice to like be like, okay, here are the next steps that you can do so that you can live a normal, healthy life. So just my 2 cents.
No,
that's good.
Great.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm just checking through if anybody's got any hands up, or anybody else want to say anything, comment, questions? No, that's good. That's cool. There's no requirement.
Well, I had another question then, if no one else does. Do we have time?
Gina, you can take it on. You can take the last question. Go for it.
So what was kind of I don't know if this might have layers, so you can choose how you want to answer. But as far as your relationship with your boyfriend and husband, how do you feel like a missing body part, or like some like scars or whatever, like that had an impact on your relationship, that you had to work through that? Or is that, if that's too intimate, totally fine, you can skirt it.
Fine. For me with my partner now, like, no, never an issue. I would say it was always the beginning stages of dating, or like looking during dating, because there's always that like uncomfortable, like, when do I tell them that I have a prosthetic? And like, do I tell them? Do I even have to bring it up? Do I have to bring up that I had cancer? So like dating was definitely like a difficulty because of those unknowns, and like especially back before disability was even represented in the media and on social media, especially like before it was even visible. Like it was hard. You're like, what do I do? And then also I did have to get through like my own insecurities, just like anyone else. Like you know, everybody has their own insecurities with their body, regardless if you have one leg or not. So I did have to work through those. But now I'm at a place in my life, like I will take my leg off at the pool. I will do, you know, I will live a normal life. Like I do not care. My body is what it is. And if you have something to say about it, like if you have something negative to say about it, like why would I listen to your opinion? Like you're clearly a rude person that would even speak out against somebody's body. Like why would I listen? Because clearly that's not an opinion I want to listen to. Like who does that kind of thing? So why would I listen to you? So yeah, just a lot of body growth that I've had to go through, but you get there.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, listen, we're just coming up to the end of the time now, and I just want to, you know, I want to thank you. I think you're a beautiful person and a beautiful person on the inside, you know, and you know, you give a lot out, and that comes really across. You're very genuine. Feel very privileged for us to have had you to be able to interview and to give us your time for this. And I know that for you know, when we do push this out, and if other young people get to see this, which I hope they will, that, you know, they'll really be inspired and helped by what you've had to say. So, you know, thank you for what you've done for us, and, you know, thank you for representing this country and everything you can do. And I guess you're continuing to compete, I hope.
Yeah.
So we've got more to come. We'll expect to see you at the next Olympic Games and World Championships. And so, yeah, so thank you. Really, thank you from all of us here. And we appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for having me and the opportunity to share. And thank you for all the work that you guys are doing for people with cancer and moving through this so that we have normal, healthy lives. So absolutely. I appreciate it.
We will do. And we will connect you and Kate so you can go on and have some fun reuniting.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.